Thank you, Shane, and Northwest Horror Show for bringing us Brain Damage and Demons and Cannibal Holocaust and this whole awesome weekend. I'm Vince from the Shivers Film Society, and we'll be doing Cinema Fantastique and Trauma Fest this summer, and we will be around all weekend as well. And without further ado, I would like to introduce the special effects artists for Brain Damage, Frankenhooker, the Basket Case sequels, Bad Biology, Gabe Bartalos. So just a couple of quick questions before, because I'm sure everybody's got questions for Gabe about his work with Frank Handenlauder and everybody else he's worked with over the years. But I have a question. Do you consider yourself a special effects artist or an artist?
Well, I think they both overlap. It's there's definitely artwork in special makeup effects. That's what drew me to it. I like drawing and painting and sculpting, and I've always loved movies, especially fantasy films. So when I realized there were makeup effects artists doing this stuff, it was a way to channel the art into the craft called makeup effects.
Yeah, and some of your work actually on the art side, you've done some work with Bjork that's been shown at the Guggenheim in New York, and also recently you've had a career retrospective at the University Art Museum in Long Beach. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's cool and it's very strange because to be able to jump from these genres is pretty cool. Yeah, it's I'm always sculpting, even on my spare time. And luckily, when film companies reach out to me, they now come wanting the weird stuff. And so there's no shortage of that in my imagination. So I get to design very strange characters, or sometimes if the deaths, if I have freedom to design them, I'll even make the deaths kind of surreal or wacky, because sometimes it's ironic, you know, people are covering their eyes, and I don't really want them to cover their eyes. I want to have them see it. So sometimes doing something that's a little surreal, it takes the edge off the violence, and sometimes even elevates it, but in a more palatable way, maybe.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned the word surreal a couple of times there, because that sort of was leading into what I was going to ask you about next. I mean, obviously you're no stranger to surrealism. I mean, you do have a raw chicken skydiving with a red parachute in your next film, which is amazing to me. Would you consider some of the directors that you've worked with in the past, Stuart Gordon, Brian Usna, Frank Henenlotter, Toby Hooper, to be horror artists, or more on the surrealistic side? Is there horror surrealism, or do you think of them just more as surrealistic films?
Well, each of them would probably be different. It's been great working with them on set, because as a makeup effects artist, they're kind of your client and you're the commercial artist. There's a list of effects, and then you daydream on how to create them, and hopefully when they're coming to me specifically, or whoever, it's because you have something to offer. So I think sometimes each director would be different. Frank goes to the surreal in a sense that's he's got that weird equation where his films resonate because he knows we both love cartoony stuff, and he's kind of gotten that equation that you could show some graphic horror, but if there's a comedic spin, Elmer, perfect example, you could almost slide through some pretty tough stuff.
What a great character. I mean, like a character made out completely literally fabricated.
Yeah,
and it's amazing. You know, he's such a component. I mean, he's the component to there. I mean, of course, Frank Herbst did an amazing job, right? They just played off each other so well. It's like, you know, Twisted Muppet Show or something.
Yeah, there were many different Elmers made, an oversized one for the close-ups. There were little animatronic ones. There were some in dynamic positions. There were just the rubbery ones made out of fishing lure material, plastisol. So Frank just had endless humor when they would just thrash around, which was funny. And so it's funny, even his sensibilities would sometimes be like, well, Frank, it's clear that it's not moving on its own, and he just thinks it's hilarious. So
yeah,
and like, okay.
And I think that transferred through. I think a lot of people really enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah, and it's a balancing act. It's he would want things, the eyes, the feeler, be very, very cartoony, and then he'd do that really sad stuff of the kid disintegrating, you know? So he kind of knows how to do that double shot.
Yeah, and I think that's why the movies, like still to this day, I think, well, it was about a dozen years ago now, but I remember an article in Entertainment Weekly saying that this was one of the tip-top drug films that's ever been made. And
It's maybe my favorite film of Frank's, and I like all his films.
it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gabe. So we'll open this up. I'll do the running with the microphone, so go easy on me. Nobody too far away, but no, I'm just kidding. Does anybody have a question for Gabe? Yes, up there. 1 sec.
Do you know what became of the various Elmers that were used in the movie?
I ended up with most of them. They've rotted away over the years. To get skins really flexible, if they're foam rubber, you whip a lot of air into the mixer. It's like baking a cake, and the foam rises. You inject it into the mold and put it in an oven. The same principles that make the foam so flexible, injecting air into them, also makes them vulnerable to deteriorating. What is left is I have in my office an oversized fiberglass of the attack head. It's like 18 inches tall, and that thing will last forever. It's kind of painted like a bronze, which is funny. All the other miniature Elmer long deteriorated. Unfortunately, they rotted away, and you have little skeletons left of them, of the levers inside. Yeah.
Oh, down here. Thank you very much.
One of my favorite scenes is the spaghetti brains scene. Can you kind of I have no idea how you pulled that off. I'd like to just hear some insight on that.
For when he's looking down at the plate and it's hallucinating, we sculpted miniature brains in 3 different sizes and molded them and ran them out of foam rubber, and they had a negative space. We ran it with something called a core. You designed a hollowed out space underneath it, and we put condoms with tubing, like made our own balloons in a sense to follow the shape of the inside. And they got access to that location for just one night. So if you were to watch it again, you'll never see detail on the plate in the wide shot. It's always like he looks down, and then we shot that a weekend later on a stage, his point of view straight down on the table. So we had a porcelain plate with holes drilled in it, and there progressively goes like 3, 5, and they're wheezing and breathing, and tubing ran out the bottom, and then I put on them squeeze bulbs, like baby ear syringes, and me and 3 guys would first, give them a little air, and Frank had the camera straight down matching his point of view. So we did it like a series, and Frank would call out more breathing, and they would get more panicked. And then the second part of it, we replaced out bigger brains, and it was so weird pouring the gravy on it, the marinara sauce, very strange. And then it got all hyperactive and crazy for the last time he looks at it. So it was really an insert with all the props altered for our dastardly deeds.
Brain marinara. Anyone else? We got time for about 2 more questions. Anyone down here?
My question is, how did you hook up with Henlotter, and do you have any good stories from working with him, where I don't know, where you guys didn't have a permit, or something on the fly kind of stuff?
I met Frank. Well, it's cool because I was a fan of Basket Case 1. I saw that film and just lost my mind when, I don't know if anyone's seen it, but there's a stop motion animation scene in it, and I literally fell out of my seat laughing. And I was working on a film called Spookies in Rye, New York, and one day at a break I went back to the room I was staying in. There was a note. Frank Henenlotter called and wants to talk to you. I was like, whoa, no way. So I went and met him in New York City, and at that time in the early 80s, there wasn't a ton of film work. Actually, there probably still isn't now. That's why I went to Los Angeles. But so the community was smaller, so you could get a phone call like that. And I was excited. I was really young, and he was just bursting with excitement, and we hit it off. And I instantly got what he was saying, and I think he felt that not only I got it, but I could maybe bring stuff to it, which I was eager to. So that's how it started. We've done 6 films since then. It's been great. And good stories. Well, the shot of Rick walking down St. Mark Street, all uncut, was cool. There's no lighting on that. Back then, the film speeds weren't that great, and that shot still holds up really good. They had a van, and we opened the door and had him walk the entire length. Overall, Frank's hilarious. You could hear from the commentary. He's like fuel-charged, very smart, very funny, and somehow gets away with making films like this that keep resonating 30 years later.
And Stanley Kubrick kind of stole that shot for Eyes Wide Shut, too.
Yeah, right?
We've got one more here.
Hi, just a brief one. I'm just curious about the actor Mike. Did he make another older kinky movie?
I don't think he did. I think like Rick Herbst went on to television, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah, I
some
think so.
soap opera. And the brother Mike, I don't think so. You know, it's interesting. Frank usually picks people who aren't known, and it's probably up to them to try and make a career after these films. They become beloved to a certain population, but for the mainstream, it's probably a harder pill to swallow, kind of just the way we want it.
Which is funny, though, because they're good-looking cast, right? Cast members.
Yeah, I
It's-
think in all of Frank's films, he gets really interesting characters. They could pull it off, and yeah, they're interesting to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. Did you want to say anything else about brain damage before we wrap it up?
Not really. Just
No?
glad everybody came to enjoy it,
Yeah.
and thanks for having me out here.
Yeah, and thank you, everybody. Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Northwest Horror Show, for putting all this on. Gabe, thank you so much for coming down.
My pleasure. Thanks.
It was great talking to you.